Well, welcome to our podcast today. This is the Oasis Weekly Update, and my name is John, and I'm speaking with Pastor Wayne Weaver, and our subject today is anxiety, and how should a Christian deal with that? Anxiety is a big problem in our world. In fact, since the COVID pandemic, statistically, anxiety around the world has increased by 25%. That's a lot of people that are dealing with anxiety. And I believe today, more than ever, we need to have some answers of how does a Christian deal with anxiety. And Pastor Wayne, a couple of weeks ago, it's almost a month now, we had a special call to prayer. You were leading the service at the end or closing the service. We had a call to prayer, and you invited people to come up if they were dealing with anxiety, and you had a special prayer for them. Now, that day, I was very surprised at the amount of people that came forward. And, you know, it takes a lot for a person who deals with anxiety to step out and say, I'm dealing with this. What did you think about that? That was a lot of people that came forward that Sunday.
I was surprised myself, and I don't know why I really asked. I was not aware necessarily, but I guess the Holy Spirit was aware that there's people that struggle with this. And I was very surprised that there's that many people that actually came up front wanting prayer. And anxiety it's difficult. It's very difficult. Anxiety, people that go through anxiety, it's difficult. And the same thing, I think we need to also address the subject on stress a little bit, because I think they intertwine a lot.
They really do. And I was, as I was thinking about this, the amount of people that deal with anxiety. And when they ask the question, what is going on, they can't quite get a good answer. I mean, I hear people talk about it, and it's social media, it's pressures at work, it's the overwhelming aspect of life. It's that, it's kind of that thing that I look at my schedule and the oxygen leaves the room. I look at a social setting and I'm like, how am I going to deal with this? It is way too overwhelming for me. It seems like a lot of people deal with something that's just kind of hanging over their heads. They're never quite sure, will I be able to deal with this or not? A full 40% of people in the U.S. deal with anxiety of some sort along the way. There's a lot of people. And in the church, I'm going to guess, I don't know if we had 40% of the congregation up that Sunday, but there were enough people that I thought, wow, that is something that we really ought to address, because I believe there are other people that are dealing with anxiety today. And part of it, we're saying, how should the Christian deal with anxiety? But then there's another question that often adds to that anxiety, and that is, should a Christian deal with anxiety? If I am born again, if all things have been made new, should I? And I think that adds to the stress that many Christians feel. Is this right for me? Am I really a Christian if I deal with this problem? It's one of the most common mental issues in the States and around the world. And I think that it's basically that low grade and sometimes even very intense, just almost the sweaty palm thing, just what's going to happen. And for a Christian, David in Psalm 37 says, do not fret because of evildoers. Well, a lot of times we look at people and we're afraid of the evil that's in the world, what's coming down the pike next. He says, don't fret because of evildoers. And then he also says, don't be envious of the workers of iniquity. And I think envy and trying to keep up with people can add some anxiety. Psalm 37:7. I'm just going to read a few of these, and then we'll get started. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret because of him who prospers in his way, because of the man who brings wicked schemes to pass. Well, when we look around the world, we fret. What's going to happen with this war, with that political situation? What's going to happen if this party or that party has control of something? We fret, and it creates anxiety. But he says, rest in the Lord. Don't do that. So it's almost like he's saying, rest in the Lord instead of fretting. But I think that's also what creates that problem for Christians. Should I be anxious? And then Psalm 37, verse 8 says, cease from anger and forsake wrath. Do not fret. It only causes harm.
Yeah.
And then how do we deal with Philippians when it says, be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will rule your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. So I think if we could, I would love to hear your thoughts, and I believe others would want to hear from your experience. First of all, one of the things that brings the anxiety for many people is feeling like they are alone against the problem. How do we deal with loneliness and not to feel alone in this world?
That's a very challenging question. You've often heard the statement that it's lonely on top. And some of that concerning loneliness is when you feel that you can't really share anything with anyone. And I think anxiety can play into this picture because you feel that you're alone and nobody understands you anyways, can't really communicate with anyone, and if you would, you don't want to expose anything the way you're dealing with it or not dealing with it. And then what happens, and all at once it starts snowballing. And there's moments of anxiety where somebody goes through something for a day or two, but then there's valleys of anxiety that you have to deal with that can go for a year or even more. And I'm familiar with both of them. And it brings me back to the question you asked me about loneliness. Loneliness is something that I've kind of adopted as being just part of me. Because where do I go? How do I answer that correctly? And most of these things I can answer by my experience. Loneliness is something that, of course, you've got walls all the way around you, or at least it feels that way. And most of the people that you could speak with, perhaps, already won't understand. And so it puts you in a tight little place where you're by yourself. And then how to overcome loneliness, some people would say, well, make a lot of friends. Well, I know people that have friends that are lonely people. Right. So friendship is not necessarily the answer, but it's actually a perception, I think, that we have of ourselves. And one of the only ways that I could get through loneliness and work through loneliness in some very lonely times, and sometimes loneliness, or it makes you feel lonely when you think you're the only one that stands. Elijah, he at one point said that, God, I'm the only one.
Right.
I'm the only one. Do you think he felt lonely? And then he ran yet. And so I think in leadership or any type of responsibility, a person will automatically come to a place where they will deal with loneliness. Now, we can really mess up loneliness by doing wrong things. And that is making friendships where friendship should not be. I know that for myself, I'm known in the community. I'm known quite well. I'm known in the business world. I'm known in the entire world, all right? And even around the globe in many places where my name used to be really, I couldn't get away from anyone really. And if somebody would ask me what my name is, I was hesitant to say what my name was because, you see, that's a picture of loneliness. You don't even want to say who you are because now sometimes all the stories people hear, and especially being a leader, a spiritual leader, people typically don't compliment you as much because they're kind of intimidated by it. This is what I find. And so when people are intimidated even being around you, it just even makes you more lonely. And so, but my outlet to all that was going to God. going to God, and you have to release. You have to release yourself and your life, and these things that will make you lonely or bring anxiety to you. I know that for myself, starting one business, two business, three business, and so on, is you come to a place where you think, is this going to work? And maybe it won't work. Maybe it'll all fall apart. And then all at once you become anxious over it. And you have to learn. And as I look back now, and it's so easy when you have some history and looking back, but see, God looks forward, and he will tell us what it looks like when we look back. And that is, trust in me. I will take care of you. Trust in me. I will take care of you. And I know that this is easy for me to say, perhaps, but do you notice the color of my hair? That comes from the
white, yeah.
That comes from the very things we're talking about. The really difficult times that a person goes through. It's hard to just come up with a complete solution how to overcome anxiety and loneliness, but this is always what I find. There has to be somewhat of a release between you and your God, where you cry out to him and you pray and for me, I literally cry, but I do find a release. And I know that there's, when you think of anxiety, I mean, there's women right now that they're afraid their husband will leave them. And then look at that picture. So you look at maybe children in the home and the husband is leaving, or vice versa, and all at once you are a husband that is afraid his wife's going to leave. And we have situations like that around the world. And so how do you trust God for that, knowing that there's many people that have experienced that very thing? I still think it comes down to you need to have a channel that's open between you and heaven, where you can cry out to God and release those feelings in you and weep before him and let him see your desperate heart. And somehow you can, I always say like this, that when we're done praying, we always get up and we're changed. If you're not done praying, you won't be changed.
And that's maybe what Paul was speaking about when he said, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer. You're saying, have that communication, have that place. So as you were speaking about the loneliness, part of that loneliness was driven by a sense of fear, not a terror, but just a fear of of rejection. What are people going to know about me? What are they going to say about me? And I think there are other people out here that, the trauma was that your name was cast down all over the place. But what about other types of trauma that have happened that have created a sense of anxiety because people are fearful that it's going to happen again? And I think that's the next question really is, how do we overcome fear when fear seems to be all around? Because fear is tied in with anxiety. It's the fear, will I be able to handle this? Will I be able to go there? Will I be able to overcome this thing? What would you say to somebody who is fearful? You mentioned the wife who is afraid her husband will leave, or the child who's afraid my parents will break up, or a husband who says, I don't know, can I trust? These types of things, because they bring anxiety, and when we're anxious, then we tread softly, like walking on broken glass. What would you say to a person like that?
Well, I know that for me, it's so nice for me to say I'm 67 years old now, because that speaks of a lot of experience. And these moments have been very close to my heart. The different things that you go through, and people see the other side of you when you're smiling and all this, but you seldom show your sadness and how you carry it around. But concerning fear, one thing that I've concluded, that fear doesn't help you. It just does not help you. It just does not help you. So you can fear and you can struggle with fear and anxiety and it doesn't help you. So you need to turn away from it. And the only way that I find for me is to turn away from fear is trust in a higher power than what you have yourself.
Right.
And that trust is a relationship, and it takes time. These things don't just go away. Like I said, I have experienced some things that, there might be let me just speak of one thing that I think I've learned a very, very valuable lesson, and I've always said since then that I would like to teach people about this because my heart issues. I had heart issues. I didn't know that, and one day I had a small heart attack. And
That's scary.
well, it is, but what brought me here? See, I always thought this, that I'm a man that is kind of made for pressure, and I enjoy pressure. I do. I mean, when I'm driving on the wrong road and this is happening and this phone call and this, they're doing this, they need my help here. I'm talking in the business world. And all at once, then somebody calls from church. Now they have some struggles that they want to talk with, and yada, yada. And it just goes on. And I love that. I just love to function where there is a lot of movement. That is really what made me. I really like that. And one day I said, I wonder if this, it seems stressful, but can stress hurt you when you love it? Well, when my heart started speaking to me, the specialist made this statement. One of the first things she said was, after she saw what was diagnosed, she said that, do you have a lot of stress? And I just said that I never heard what real stress is. I don't know. And I asked, can you tell me what stress is? And this is good for whoever listens. And I think this is very important. And I think we need to teach our young generation about this. So it is when you go to bed at night and it's on your shoulder, and you wake up in the morning and it's on your shoulder. That's stress. Then I said, I have a lot of stress. I went through some very difficult times at the end of that stressful thing where I was very lonely and very anxious because it seemed that from a church perspective, things were just falling apart. And it was really difficult. And I didn't feel support. And so where does that put you? Put you out on an island. And you're afraid to move. You're afraid anything. It's just an awful place. And in that, I got a very good taste of what anxiety can be. And I think it led up to where my heart issues became, where it became a heart issue. Well, so this specialist asked me this question. If I would ask you this question, after this diagnosis now, would you be able to quit your job tomorrow? Have you looked ahead and supplied for your needs that you could retire? And I said, yes, I could do that. And then she looked at me and she said, you've managed well. And then she looked at me and she said, but you didn't manage your heart well. And I thought, this is interesting. I never thought of my heart. And your heart can only take so much. Your emotions can only take so much. And I'm finding this as you get older, your thinking is much more concentrated. You're concentrating, or it's condensed. It's when someone says, let's go do this, I'm seeing 1,000 things that have to be done before we can do that. When I was younger, I could just say, oh yeah, let's do it. And the pieces would fly as we walk. But as you get older, you have a lot more experience that there's many more details that is entailed in a decision. And you often make mistakes when you're young, but as you grow older and have more experience, you make less mistakes typically. And it comes from that. So your life actually becomes quite complex as you grow older. And for that is where a lot of people don't want to start new businesses as they get older. Or in the church world, people, retire. Why do you think that is? And so I think all of this is, and the other thing too is anxiety comes from when there is more than one issue that is on your plate. And I've also found that, say, for instance, this would be a plate. I've also found that when I am in a moment that is quite anxious, that I'm anxious, that I'm like, I'm not going to bed, I'm not sleeping tonight, I wake up and that's all I can think. And during the night, 1 o'clock, and then it's 2 o'clock, and then you go and sleep maybe an hour or two, and then you wake up again, and it's the same thing. It's because you have a whole bunch of things on this plate. And I also found then in that, and I know I'm not really giving spiritual answers, But this is the way it is. That take some of those pieces off the plate that don't need to be on there. And I've counseled with people and told them that. What are some of the things that really bother you? And they give me, and I had them write it down, maybe 10 things, their top things. And then we look at the things that we can take off this plate and not worry about it. And it narrows it down where anxiety, then all at once you'll find a place of rest. Now, it's easy for me to say, well, cast your cares upon him. He cares for you. Yeah, that's true. He does. And that's the conclusion of my life. He does. But there is some things on our part that we have to do correctly, or we're going to suffer.
Living that reality is tough. Yeah,
exactly.
Now, you made a comment just a bit ago that life gets more complicated as you get older. There's a statistic out there that says that slightly over 30% of teens and adolescents and teens deal with a significant amount of anxiety. Now, when they hear you saying life gets more complicated, they say, how can it get more complicated than this? What would you tell a younger you about life?
You're younger. And a lot of these things is based on experience. You know, it's like I've walked there once, and I look back, and that was nothing really to deal with. But my mind was younger, and it looked like a really big thing. And I think it's still treated the same way. The way it's done when you're young. When you're younger, you're much more self-conscious. Everything has to be right. And it has to be, and the idea is for approval. And as you get older, that's not an issue anymore. And I remember that those were issues that I had that I wish I wouldn't have this problem with trying to find approval with people. And I knew, according to the Bible, that should not be any problem with me. My approval is to be approved of God and not of man. But to be honest, that is an issue. Because we don't want to be evil thought of.
Right.
You know what I mean? But when the young people have that, that is often what it is. And I say like this, those are just maybe preludes to what's coming in the future. But learn to deal with those things when you're young. Learn to deal with them well and be able to say no to something. The Bible does say that we are to, where is that verse? I don't have it in front of me right now, where it talks about bring every thought to the obedience of Christ.
Yes, 2 Corinthians 10, 3-5, I think it's in
Can
there.
You repeat it?
It talks about the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. Yes.
You know, when I was with the young people, we're speaking to young people as well. When I was with the young people, I once told my brother, this is just when I started, when I was 16 years old. I said, I just don't know where to put my hands and nothing when I sit there. And I said, I just feel that everyone's looking at me. And so he said, when you get that feeling sometimes, just look around and see who all is looking. And so I did. There's nobody looking at me.
You know, and that's so much the way it is, isn't it? I was thinking about some of you made a comment about mothers and being fearful. And I've seen numerous mothers who have come in for counseling. And one of the things that I will ask them at times is, you know, is this thing you're worrying about your responsibility? Or is that God's? Or does that belong to somebody else? And there's a real tendency that we have to try to pick up responsibilities. I think that actually are God's, that should be left in His hands. You know, and I will tell them sometimes, you know, let God be God and you be a mom, you know, because there are certain things that our families need, and one God is enough. We need a mother.
It's true.
We need a wife. We need a husband. It
is true. On the other hand, mothers have a big handful right now. You know, I see these mothers that have 3 and 4 little children, and they're taking care of them all at once. And you know, we men are out there, and we're doing our things, and we come home, and their work is always, it never ceases. It's like in the morning, the children are hungry. In the evening, put them to bed, and after bed, then they're ready to sleep. You know what I mean? Then it's like they close their eyes. Right. And so I have a high admiration for that kind of, and it's so non-rewarding to a lot of
It's a thankless
mothers.
job many
It
times.
really
yes.
is. It really is. And you wonder, does anybody ever notice? And it's not about that. It's not about that. But it is about leaving an impression on the young children. And you might not, you mothers might not take care of them 100% correctly. I mean, I know I have two sister-in-laws that are just daughter-in-laws that are tremendous daughter-in-laws, and they take very well care of their children. It's obvious. And a daughter that has 4 children. I mean, they have their hands full. But when I look at them, you see the imprints of them on the children, and that to
Right.
me is
It's beautiful.
yeah. You go through some difficult times, and you go through some hard times. You think there's no rest, and I can't get this done. I can't get this done, and I'm behind in everything. And then what happens? And all at once you say, "Now sit down right now." You raise your voice a little bit, and then you feel condemned by that. You know what, mothers? You're never going to be perfect according to your own perfection. But God doesn't look at it that way.
Right.
He doesn't look at it that way. He knows we go through frustrating times. And he also knows that there's times when we do things that we just simply should not do, but we did. And we don't have to condemn ourselves and just be down on ourselves so like this cloud of something comes over you. And I'd like to speak a little bit about this, John. I came through a time that I didn't know existed here about, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, where there was a cloud hanging over my head.
Right.
And it was a cloud of darkness. It was like going through a deep tunnel. It lasted about 3 years. I lost pretty much all hope. And I had people that I thought were my friends, and ended up they were not friends. And basically left me set and didn't say a word, and just up and walked away from me. And still to this day, it's a big mystery. But no, then what happens is there was just like a gloomy cloud that hung on me. In the morning, I look out through the window and I see nothing but just pain and hurt. And I couldn't get out of this. I just could not get out of this. And I was never suicidal, never like that. But I could see that a person can literally lose his mind. And I was at that place where I think some of my family was concerned about me losing my mind on some of this, because it was so very tragic to me, and it hurt so deeply, and yet there was no reason for it. And what is the answer? And that is anxiety in its fullest form that I've experienced there.
Where it actually took away all hope.
Oh, all hope.
And
all
anxiety
hope.
led you to despair.
Yeah. And I knew that I was all wrong, but I didn't know where. And it was not that I would have listened to anyone to tell me what all I did wrong, but nothing was said. No explanations given. And it was just such a doomy, gloomy cloud of hopelessness and despair that that's part of where my heart started just saying, I can't go on like this. And but what that did, I look back and I prayed a lot through that time. I remember I could give you instances of tremendous prayer where I went in the night and just spent time with God. But there seemed to be no relief, just no relief. Even the more I'd pray, even almost seems the worse it would get, because you're mindful of everything. You're mindful of what you're praying about is the very things that are bothering you. But there seemed to be no release. But I can point my finger to several things that happened that started, of course, a different trend now. But then the other thing is not to condemn yourself so much. My thing was, people are not telling me what I did wrong. So maybe I need not to worry about that. Because if it's something I did wrong, then I could at least correct it.
And up till that point, you're trying to imagine what you've done
Exactly
wrong.
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And John, you know how it is. We can always do things different. I look back,
Right.
there's some things that I could have done this way or that way or this way in my entire life. But at the moment you're thinking this, and you're thinking this, and you're thinking this, and you're thinking this. So you try to steer in the best way you can, not in any selfish way. God knows that I'm not that way. I'm not trying to protect myself. I just have never. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm just simply wrong. And I'm not trying to excuse myself that, well, that's just not me. I'll take the blame. That was also part of the problem. I would blame myself for everything. And so there is a place of refuge, but it took time.
And how did you find that? How did you find that?
I think as I look back, praying, doing a lot of praying, and that is in the night. You might say that, well, when do I have time? In the night when everyone's sleeping, I'd go upstairs in an unheated room in the nighttime, and that's where I spent time in praying to God and somehow trying to get refreshed again so I can survive, and then to be confronted again with the same thing the next morning. But there was a secret strength in that I think had a great influence in carrying me through. I know some people would say, well, you didn't have enough faith. Well, unless you can walk where another person walks and have the same personality, you will never know. You will really never know. And I think for me was try to be there for everyone. Try to help. Sometimes just to stand with someone. And just stand there. I love you, brother. I care for you. I think the world of you. Keep going. Even if you see something that might be not quite right, it's not about that. It's about I'm here to help you. My arm around you, just a smile. I think those are the things that probably helped me a tremendous amount.
And even just somebody saying, I see God at work in you is a huge thing. When you're feeling like he's almost abandoned me, to just know that somebody sees the hand of God, even where I didn't see it, has got to be affirming and comforting.
Yeah. Now, for me, I can say, and having a good partner, which I do, but you can't share everything because then they go down. See what I'm saying? So some of these things, and I say like this, that God knows what we can take, and he will not allow things that, and I know that verse that he will not allow things to happen to me that I cannot bear, but he gets real close to it. And but time and patience, and that's part of what our calling is in this kingdom, is a kingdom of patience. And tomorrow I might have a better answer. And next year I might be able to look back and cherish this valley I walked through. And I can already say that. You look back and you see that, I can cherish that because it did something in my heart that nothing else could have. And just never give up. As long as you don't give up, God doesn't give up on you. If you give up, then there's nothing about that he can do. So never give up. And sometimes we walk, and John, it's like this. I'll say this. I'll make this statement. So we see unstable people. They're one day they're here, and another they're there. There's
up and down.
And you think, why can't somebody be more stable? Have you ever thought that about yourself? I sure have. Very many times, because I deal with feelings that other people don't see. And so I look at this as that somebody looks at me, knows exactly what I feel like right now. They would absolutely not have any trust in me. They wouldn't think I could ever be a leader.
Say, what is he doing in that position?
World? Yeah,
exactly.
But I have noticed one thing is your feet have to stay straight. You might be able to bend and you might be able to be quivering at times, but the feet need to stand straight and move on. You need to walk on. You need to make those motions. Don't sit in the same spot. Get up and keep moving. Keep moving. Don't just sit there. If you sit there, that's where real trouble starts. So you have to keep moving. And I think in that sometimes we reflect and people see how we walk as we walk and that we do walk. And they can admire us when we sure have nothing to admire within.
Oh, boy, isn't that the truth? And thank God for his grace in that. I would like to ask you kind of one final question regarding this. That morning when we called the people up, when you called the people up front to pray for special prayer for anxiety, One of the things you spoke about was how anxiety comes from believing lies.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
and then you talked about how there are times when you get up and you just feel like somebody puked on you. You
Mm-hmm.
just
Yeah.
walk around kind of in the
Mm-hmm.
dumps,
Yeah.
and you're just struggling to face the day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Maybe we could sort of wrap
Yeah.
this session up with what you told us that morning
Yeah.
about dealing with those times, because a lot of anxiety happens because we begin to believe lies about what we're facing. Either it's going to be bigger or worse or
Yeah.
and more embarrassing, or it's
Mm-hmm.
just impossible. Those things tend to make us anxious.
Mm-hmm.
How do we deal with that?
Well, sometimes I call them spiritual gut kicks. We get a kick in our stomach about something that really took us by surprise. But what I also noticed, and I've been dealing with demonic things in people's lives for many years, and I've never really noticed so clearly that these voices can be speaking to you, and they'll make you feel like that. I just never. It's surprising. It's like, God, why did you wait to allow me to see this until I'm getting older? And before you just kind of pass it on, I just feel so ugly this morning. I just feel so bad. It's like somebody puked on me, and it's just like awful. And it's like, well, you go out and, drink coffee and move on and get it behind you and think other things. But in my older years, all at once I've noticed, that's the devil. It's the devil.
Mm-hmm.
And I address him as that. And I simply tell him to get behind me. You see, Jesus said to the devil, get behind me. Was the devil in front of him? Maybe so, because he told me, get behind me. See, when the devil is in front of you, and he's wanting you to follow him,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, get behind me, Satan. And so I have learned that I tell him, in the name of Jesus, I will not listen to that voice. I will not receive this. And this is the voice of the devil, the voice of the enemy. Get behind me in Jesus' name. I will not listen to you. I will not take that. I will not believe that. And almost, I'll say this, entirely every time, within sometimes moments, sometimes maybe as much as 15 minutes, I even forgot what was bothering me. And that cloud left.
Mm-hmm.
There's something to that. There really is. Identify what is causing this to you. If it's a voice like that, if it's that strong presence of something that is so hopeless, consider that to be the enemy trying to really bring destruction to you. And that causes anxiety. It really does.
And it happens in the mind. And I think,
yeah, it does. Yeah.
I think when those things are coming, and there may be somebody listening to this and they're saying, yeah, but I don't always know what is from God and what is from the devil. One of the things that I do then is go back to that reference that that verse that you referenced, where we bring every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. And there are times when I will take those thoughts and I will just say, Lord Jesus, can you take these thoughts? I don't even know what to make of them.
Yeah.
Can you take them captive to obey you? And I've found the same thing has happened because he knows how to sort through those. So
it's a spiritual warfare.
It is.
We need to be mindful of that. There's some things we can prevent. We can change some things in where we are, where we work, what we do, responsibilities. But these personal attacks are spiritual attacks. So many times, and need to be dealt with correctly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's about time to wrap
Yeah.
this up for today. Are there any final words you would want to say as we just bring this to a close?
If you have problems with anxiety or things that we have covered today, don't let it go too long in your life, because it can become very destructive, and it's not healthy for you. It's not healthy for your spiritual life and not for your physical life as well. And do something about it. Get some help. Or the things that we mentioned here. And I could probably speak another hour or two on this subject that you could probably find some more answers to. But
We
remember,
might have to do a second episode.
oh, might be. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, and you need to identify that. And what is the thing that keeps getting you down? Because we always have some weak points. And he tries to get those weak points, as well as sometimes even our friends or our enemies.
Amen. So we want to leave you with a verse out of Matthew 11, where Jesus gave this invitation, and he said, "Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." May God grant you that place of rest, and that's our prayer for you.
Amen.
And God
Amen.
bless you today.
Amen.